Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok. My partner in crime has returned from his long vacation. It felt too long that you were gone, my friend. Vasili, welcome back.
Hey man, it's awesome to be back. I'm super excited. It's weird because 2 weeks off usually, and we do like all year. It's strange to not talk about the Flyers, right? Even though there's not a lot of news going on and things like that, but
At least
definitely,
it was the off season, dude. If something
yeah.
big happened while you were away, you would have been like, oh,
I
just
would have wanted to talk
calling.
about it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would want to talk about it so bad, right? So
Yeah.
it's good that it's during the off season. I mean, that episode with Jim Jackson, I would have loved to make it. It was a great conversation you two had. Unfortunately, I had some work obligations there, and then obviously just got back from vacation. So even though there's not too much to dive into in terms of news, I'm super excited to just talk about the Flyers. It's
Hell
been
yeah.
felt like forever, man. Literally.
Hell yeah, dude. I am pumped. Honestly, I cannot wait for the season. I am so freaking excited.
We're close. We're
I
very
don't
close,
care if we
right?
finish at the bottom of the league. I'm excited for every single season. Always.
Yeah.
So okay, before we kick it off, I just want to say shout out to our sponsor, Gym Steaks. They're still not open, but keep them in your hearts and mind. They are rebuilding, they are reopening. I have not heard an official date yet. I've been kind of checking. So again, Gym Steaks, 4th and South, when they reopen, they are currently being remodeled. Go get yourself a cheesesteak. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe, hit the bell notification for notifications at any point that I put a video out, whether it be at midnight, 1 in the morning, it's there to annoy you. So all joking aside, it's a humongous help to us. The likes, the subscribes, it's been amazing. Even in the off season, our numbers are still high. There's nothing to talk about, and you guys are still listening, and we love that. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit to talk about, and Vasili and I could talk Flyers all day. We joke that we can't go under 90 minutes. But again, the fact that you guys are listening and dialing in, and I see all the great feedback and the messages. I think somebody named Dave messaged me. Thank you so much. Just I sent it to Vasili. Like, you guys are awesome. That stuff is so cool to see. And you talk about that itch. If you guys have that itch, it's good to blog about it. Find a way to get that out. It helps. I used to talk people's heads off about the Flyers like nonstop until I started this. Now it's like therapy, like I talked about. All right. Let's get into Flyers news. We're going to be talking about some broadcasting news that came out. We'll talk a little bit about Frost. Won't spend too much time on that. We'll talk about a little bit about Michkov, something I've kind of been thinking about, and something you and I will dig into. We'll talk about the upcoming rookie game that is actually not far away at all, and I'm sure it's going to sneak up on a lot of you guys. Then a couple breakdown videos about the Flyers. Or a breakdown of two videos about the Flyers, about season previews, one from Steve Dangle's networks, SDPN, the other one from the Hockey Guy. I'll explain who they are. Then we'll do some UFA talk there at the end to wrap it up. So I'm looking forward to this, Vasili. Let's get into it, dude. I'll leave it to you, but just this news kind of broke out as Vasili and I were actually broke out earlier today. So Vasili and I thought we'd bring it up first, but there is a little bit of news about broadcasting for the Flyers this year. So we figured we share it. The Flyers shared it with us. So we figured it'd be a good idea to share with you guys. So what do the Flyers have for us, Vasili?
Yeah, so they just released some interesting news that they're going to be featured on ABC, ESPN, ESPN Plus, Hulu, and TNT 12 times. So that means the Flyers will be on your major networks, and you'll be able to watch them pretty easily for those 12 games.
Oh,
So
except for the ESPN Plus, let's be honest.
except ESPN Plus has been a drag, but
at least it's Hulu and ESPN Plus. You can have one or the other.
There's ways to get around it, though, right, guys? So
yes, there is. And if
we
you
won't
don't
advertise
know a way, you can message me
or me
on Twitter. Yeah, and we will help you find ways around it. Not that we condone that, but quite frankly, if the NHL has not found a good way to broadcast games, I will continue to bitch about it until there is one source to watch hockey. Otherwise, that is absolutely ridiculous. As a product, I understand why it exists as a business. I understand the blackout restrictions. I understand the contracts. You got to figure this out. You got to
grow the game just for the sake of that, right?
You got to figure out a portal. I got to be able to pay you and just be
able
to
watch every
Flyers game, right?
Yeah.
Every
or every
Flyers game,
game in general,
yes,
really, like
including the playoffs, on my computer, on my iPad, on my TV, seamlessly. It's 100% possible. I hope they're working towards that. I would
in
imagine they are.
2023, you would think, right?
I mean, dude, things are so bad with broadcasting that the Flyers, that the Comcast had its own game blocked out by accident.
Which is hilarious.
Do you remember that last year?
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
remember that.
I had to watch an illegal source to watch the game. Otherwise,
And
there was no way
I'm
of
in,
watching.
well, it's funny because I'm in Canada, so like I was watching it easily, and everybody's like, I see on Twitter, like, why can't I watch the game? Like I'm in Philly. I'm like, it really doesn't make any sense. But
It just messed up, but that's how complex it is. It's a disaster.
Yeah. So just to go back to those 12 games, I'll just list them out. So October 19th, they're going to take on the Oilers, and that'll be on ESPN plus Hulu. So that's early in the season to get on everybody's nerves there. Get ESPN
Noah Cates
out of the way.
Connor McDavid. You know that's going to be the matchup, dude.
It should, yeah, or Couturier, I guess.
That's a good point, actually. But Noah Cates did such a good job.
He did really good last season.
He might open up Coots a little bit.
Yeah. So we had second one there is October 24th against Vegas. That's also ESPN Plus. Thursday, October 26th against the Wild. That's ESPN Plus and Hulu. So a lot of ESPN Plus to start for these, which isn't good. November 1st, we have.
I mean,
Buffalo.
It's good that they're getting national broadcasts, but ESPN Plus, like,
we already went through kind of the limitations there with that platform.
Disney stinks. Sorry, I'm not. They have been a bad company for a little bit, and it's obvious. Sorry. Continue.
No worries. But yeah, Buffalo on TNT, which is, I really like that their broadcast. That'll be fun. November 15th against Carolina on TNT. Then they have the 28th of November against Carolina on ESPN Plus. The 10th of February against Seattle. That's on ESPN Plus and Hulu. Saturday, February 17th against New Jersey. That's on ABC and ESPN Plus. And then the final four are against Chicago, the Rangers, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicago game's on TNT, Rangers game on ESPN Plus and Hulu, Pittsburgh game on TNT, and the final of the 12 there on March 4th against St. Louis is on ESPN Plus. So overall, there'll be some national broadcasts for the Flyers to sum it up, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, so Disney has lost. Their parks still make them a considerable amount of money, though their revenue has been decreasing. They have not made money on their last 5 movies, and they have been huge movies. Indiana Jones, including in there, some Pixar films. They're not doing well right now, and they're actually looking to sell ESPN potentially. They're trying to sell off assets.
That honestly might be a good thing.
It would be amazing.
NHL, so.
Could the NHL buy it? You know, I know that sounds ridiculous. They can't afford to. They don't have that kind of cash lying around, but it would be nice if somebody, new who respects hockey a little bit more takes over. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Comcast could buy them.
That would be,
which is weird that the team that owns the Flyers can afford to buy them, but the Flyers, but the NHL itself cannot. Yeah.
That just shows the entity that Comcast really is, right?
Yeah, no, they're humongous. Look, Rogers is like that in Canada, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a straight gridlock. Well, Rogers, Bell, and TELUS. It's like basically a monopoly in terms of telco companies in Canada. So
I will say this, ESPN still has room for redemption.
Yeah.
But I just saw that Brian Boucher got locked up by TNT.
That's a loss for them.
Yeah. I mean, he's elite at what he does. He walked in and was one of the best analysts in the NHL, noticeably so. Same way Keith Jones did it.
Yeah, I have an insight about that. Like, I always feel like, at least for me, and I've noticed this, I feel like goalies that make the transition to broadcasting, they always provide that broad perspective, which I think makes sense because they're watching the game from the net and kind of seeing it all unfold. So,
that's interesting. I like that. I also think Bush in general is an excellent communicator.
Smart guy too.
Very noticeable. It's people talk about athletes not being smart. I guarantee you that the data behind that is absolutely not true. They're either average or higher, especially professional athletes. They're going to have higher than average IQs. Again, you have to
think about the discipline that it takes to be a professional athlete.
The level of processing that your brain has to do in split seconds, like the likelihood that they're all stupid really, really unlikely. I'm sure there's some dumb athletes, but on the whole, I would imagine majority of them have relatively high IQs, actually.
It's just the narrative, right? That like, oh, you missed so
people
much
don't like
school.
well, I think
that.
people don't like the idea that somebody could have it all, but it's really about there are these people that have it all, you know, where they're above average smart, they're incredibly tall, they're good looking, they're wealthy. That it just exists. Like those biological advantages do exist. Again, think about the level of competition these guys have to get to. They are the best player everywhere they go.
Well, you got to push yourself,
the NHL,
obviously,
the
to
NBA.
That point. You got to push yourself to that point, right?
Yeah,
so.
and you also have to be able to you have to have a natural ability sometimes, right? Like the natural ability that Patrick Kane has versus Mike Knuble, for instance, right? Like Knuble made it because he got smarter as he got older, right? He got better at the game, right? I think even Bill Meltzer talked about that on Flyers Daily Faceoff, just how he studies the game, high level study. And then you look at Patrick Kane. I'm sure he understands the game and studies it, but like, come on, you know, the natural ability.
Sometimes it's an innate thing for certain guys, right?
It's both, and that's why he's a generational talent. And Knuble is just a good player. It was a very good complimentary guy. But anyway, we're going off topic. All right, on to the next topic. Morgan Frost. We're not going to stick on this too much, but I will say this: we are at August 30th as we record this. The rookie game is on the 15th. That is a Friday. We'll talk about it more in a minute, or in a few minutes. But Frost, in my opinion, if something's going to happen, it's going to be in the month of September, closer to camp, and that's probably where. See, again, I'm still under the impression, and I kind of been saying this. I said, you know, kind of 1 to 2 years, but now that. You know, the closer we reach the edge, the closer I believe it'll be a 1-year deal. I agree with Bill Meltzer. He's kind of been saying that for a while. He's been saying it, I don't know, for a couple months already. But I think most likely it'll be a 1-year deal, you know, between 1.5 and 2 million. We'll see. I have no idea. I could 100% be wrong, but that's kind of how I see things playing out. If he signs like right now, maybe it'll be a 2-year deal. But I just don't see a long-term contract being handed to any of the young guys, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
None of them got it. Even Noah Cates, who I think he's a very fair investment. Like if we signed him for 7 years,
he was the best candidate, right? So
if we signed him for 7 years, people would have been like, "Whoa!" But okay, we get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he'll be effective in that role. He'll be effective in that role for that time. So it would have made sense.
Even York has done very well as a young defenseman in the NHL. Even if he's not an elite young defenseman. In the end, which I don't think he will be. I think he will be good, but he's already done enough to warrant that he's an NHL player.
Yeah, exactly. Even by the metrics too. So I think in terms of Frost, it's interesting. Obviously, what I think it's going to be is that it's essentially a deadline by action, right? Like, I believe training camp begins exactly on Thursday, September 21st, with the on ice workouts, and then as you were saying, rookie camp's Thursday, September 14th. So with those days coming up, right, like in the next couple of weeks, that just forces both parties' hands in a negotiation. It's kind of like, when you're trying to negotiate with, let's say, a player that you don't want to go to UFA. You have a hard deadline, right? Like it isn't technically a hard deadline. You can go into camp and not sign, but
but he wants to be at camp.
Yeah, exactly. And
he doesn't want to miss camp, and they don't want him to miss camp.
That's what I mean.
It'll set him back.
I think Yariv, for him, it makes sense just in terms of the relationship that he has with Tortorella. We know that it's not the greatest based on last season. Yeah. So for him to make the best impression that he can, to get the most playing time he can, which is what he needs to do for his own career, so he can show that, hey, like I'm a really good NHL player and I can produce in this league and have an impact for my team. He's going to want to be at camp to start and make a good impression with the coach that doesn't really like him too much, right?
And he also doesn't want to create a perception that he is a problem, which I do not think he is in any way.
I agree.
But again, from the outside, you see a kid withholding who doesn't have much leverage. Even if the Flyers, let's say Morgan Frost only puts up 50 points this year, that is a very marginal improvement over what he did. Even if he scores 5 more goals, right?
Yeah.
And he's like a 20-goal scorer, 25 assists, that opens him up to being traded as well. Because we can't, it's not that we can't have him, But that's not why the Flyers brought him in. They brought him in to be a point per game guy, hopefully, right?
Or close, yeah.
Right. So otherwise, if they're going to have somebody on the third line, middle six, they're probably going to want physicality. It's not so much that they don't like him, but does he fit into that role that they need in the future?
Yeah,
Is it somebody they could really invest in?
I think they definitely.
So he's a trade option. That's all I'm saying. He's not at the top of the list, but he is a trade option.
Yeah, I think they definitely want him to be more of a top 6 option than bottom 6, right?
Right. And which means above 55 points.
Yeah, probably
60 points a game. Or
probably based on this 46 point season,
60.
They're probably thinking, okay, he had 46 points. If he can hit between 55 and 70, that's what we're kind of looking for in terms of a step up.
Maybe those are the power play points, right?
Yeah.
Like 70 is a lot. That makes him an elite player in the league, right? And I get that. But again, you guys have to. I'm sorry, I'm not arguing with you, Vasili. When people are listening to this, you have to remember if he's going to be here long term, he's 24. He has to have a defined role on this team, right? He has
to be on the power play with his skill set, for
sure. And if right now he's not ranked in the top 2 lines, and again, there are huge question marks, and I think he was, right? He's in that mix, but he's not definitely there. So he has to capture one of those spots where Noah Cates, you'd be okay with putting him on the third line.
Yeah.
Because of the way he plays as a coach. That makes sense. You need a third line grinder. You want a third line. But again, everything's about roles. And if he can't drive the second line definitively, and they think that Cutter Gauthier is going to come in here next year and take that spot from him, they might want to trade him and be like, well, we need a defenseman. Maybe this can help us get an asset to get that D-man. Again, we're just speculating. And anytime you have contract negotiations like this, you have to consider that a team will trade a player at some point. Because that could happen to almost anyone on this team. We all know that. But definitely to the guys who have a 1-year deal, with a UFA period upcoming, and their role here is not certain. Where York, who's competing with him, right? Emil Andre, there's one who's competing with Noah Cates at that specific role. Right now, Elliot Denoyer, who's not even in the NHL yet, right? But again, that fourth line role is what Ryan Paling's going to take it from. You know what I mean? Like it's all about the roles. And right now, while Frost is on track for that, we know, like you said, coach doesn't necessarily think he is there yet. So, right? Like he didn't praise him for being like, oh, what night and day from the beginning of the year. And that's the only thing we didn't see that.
That's why, Yariv, I really think that it behooves him to probably sign and make sure he's in camp on day one.
Just play for your contract. Play for your career contract, whether it be here or anywhere else.
Yeah, just so he can make that impression, right? And I mean, like we know Tortorella.
Well, that's why he will sign.
Yeah, he wants guys in camp early. I assume guys will be back early September, probably start potentially after Labor Day, stuff like that. Guys are going to start trickling in. So that just makes me think even more like we're probably going to see some action and see something reach soon in terms of an agreement. And then also too, if you look at it, right, like it's likely going to be a 1-year deal just based on, okay, they haven't signed long-term yet. If it was going to be long-term, it would have happened already.
Yeah.
So I just think like based on what's happening, the fact the deadline to training camps coming up so soon, the fact they haven't already signed long-term, it's kind of leaning towards, okay, it's 1 year, 2 years, probably max. And that, I mean, that has to do with, the fact that there's just not a lot of time left to negotiate, and maybe the impressions they have of him, but also to just the fact that there's no real way like for him to max out his value because we know the salary cap's going up so much in the next couple of years. So also doesn't make sense from his perspective. So I think it just all points to 1 year, 2 years potentially.
Yeah. If he holds out though, in my opinion, he's getting traded.
Yeah, I agree with that.
If he's not coming into camp, I think he's on the move. I could 100% be right. I don't think there's a William Nylander situation. This is not that. The Flyers are not even trying to win, so he has no leverage because they're not even rushing him in. Like they want him at camp so he has a good season, but they don't want. They're not like, oh, if we don't have Morgan Frost in the lineup, we might not make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's not make or break for them whatsoever.
And we know that they don't view him that way either, which is also part of the problem. His problem, I would say, is that I don't think that they view him as a must-have player in this lineup, even though he's got
to prove that, right?
So. He showed flashes of it to us, but we don't know what's going on in the locker room
behind the scenes.
Yeah, That's
Like
kind of the problem.
personally, I think, like you said, like I think he has all the makings to improve next season as long as he gets the usage. But for me, I'm not 100% sold the coaching staff's going to give him that usage or views him the same way that we do,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the disconnect. So we'll see what happens, right? Like it's going to be interesting, but I expect that he'll probably sign pretty shortly.
There's always drama, always drama.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next topic. So this is something I've been thinking about lately. So obviously we've been talking about Matvei Michkov quite a bit, not as much in these past couple episodes, but an insane amount, obviously, prior to that. So again, name the episode after this, just because this was like an interesting thought that I had. You know, I noticed that Matvei Michkov was benched in a game in Russia. And again, I want to go back to his draft year. He had very similar problems. What was the team he played for? I forget.
It was HC Sochi.
Sochi, right? Didn't they? I believe they didn't really play him, and essentially he got moved to the worst team in the league, where he started getting ice time.
So it was SKA didn't play him, his team now, and then they moved him to HC Sochi, which is the worst team in the league, to give him ice time.
And then he tore it up.
Yeah, exactly. He had almost a point a game.
So we're seeing that pattern again, right?
Yeah.
He was benched. He was used heavily in preseason, but now that it's so, like, if people are not aware, like the KHL does not develop players at all. Like if the coach doesn't think you're ready, you are either benched or playing 3 minutes a night. And you can look around the league. That happens consistently. Like it's not like the NHL where you'll get 10 minutes, you get a little bit of power play time. Like they don't do that. And I was thinking about this idea, like it's the first time it happened to him. Now it's happening to him again, you know? And you know, you look at the situation in the KHL, you look at his other draft members, all three of them, Carlson, I believe as well, Carlson, Fantilli, and Bedard will all be playing in the NHL this year, right? All of those top 4 caliber, right? Whatever the rankings are, but he's in there with that group. He's not playing in the NHL. He's being benched in the KHL. How long is he really going to want to be in the KHL? And again, I'm not saying it's going to continue. You know, a guy of that talent, like arguably, if it's not this year that he's allowed to play with SKA, you know what I mean? Next year when he's older, he'll probably be a dominant player for them, right? You saw that with Kaprizov and other players, but like they don't really develop at all. You know, they're going to push him around to other teams. How much does he love that? You know? And again, we know there are limitations. I have no idea what the options are, but I was thinking about, like, does he want to be in the KHL? You know, I was like thinking about that concept, like in his mind. I'm sure it's home. He has friends there. Like, I doubt he's like, oh, this place is the worst. But if he could probably pick a development path, I mean, don't you think that he would want to be in the, maybe not this year, but in the NHL like next year? So he's done with this stuff and done with being moved around, and then gets to go play for a team and start competing for a Stanley Cup alongside his other, you know, the other guys from that league. All athletes at that level are extremely competitive. Extremely. That's the reason they got to the point that they are. They're nuts. And I think about that. And I'm like, with the handling, the way things went for him last year, the fact he's not getting to play on the world stage, nobody's going to talk about him. You know, they'll talk about him in Russia, but he's again going to be ignored. Same with Dadonov, right? Like they're going to be ignored. Like they'll be talked about a little bit.
Demidov.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I said Dadonov. Demidov, right? There are these Russian players that really won't get much attention playing over there on the world stage because of what's happening. You know, what do you think about that, Vasili? Do you think that there's a chance that this kid, on his own, again, this is pure speculation, this is off season, so it's a little bit nonsense, but I was just thinking about it today. You know, if that pattern continues, don't you think that like any athlete would want to be like, well, I don't want to be here. Like this is inconsistent and I'm not getting the playing time with the team I want to play for. And it's, you know, I'd rather like just go to this team. This team is dying to have me and wants to throw me in their top 6 next year. You know what I mean?
I think it's a good point to bring up because I mean, any player, any hockey player wants to play and they want playing time and they want the ability to show that they can be an impact guy and a producer. And we know how competitive Michkov is. And we've, you know, learned how competitive he is just based on like his teammates speaking about him, like the way he conducts himself in the locker room and stuff like that. So he's obviously a guy
that kill him when he gets benched.
Yeah, exactly. He's obviously a guy that wants to play and a guy that wants to be a competitor and, you know, be able to produce for his team every single night. So I think if for him, if it's a long-term thing where he's consistently benched this year for SKA or playing like fourth line minutes or being the 13th forward,
They'll loan him again.
they'll likely loan him, right? Like that's probably what will happen. And I mean, I would imagine that the Flyers and potentially his
Look at
agent
that, no?
well, I imagine they'll look at that and they'll say, well, if he's going to be in the KHL, at least loan him to a team that's going to play him. So they'll probably have some involvement there, right? If that's the case,
they'll try, but
they'll try.
You know, the KHL don't care.
But I think it's more of his agent that would be the main individual kind of advocating for him.
You're right. Actually, that's a good point. Probably working with the Flyers. You're right.
Yeah, so we'd have to see what happens. I think if he got loaned and got playing time, I don't think it would be that big of a deal because ultimately, I think next season, I think next season he would really get his real shot for SKA. But I think if he, let's say, stayed on SKA, they didn't loan him and they wanted to keep it just in case they wanted to use him down the line because he is very talented and he has been scoring like in almost every game he's played in the preseason, essentially. Like they might say, well, no, we don't want to loan him to another team. We want to keep him in case one of our guys get hurt and we can plug him into the top 6 or top 9 or whatever. Yeah. Any team could think that because they're trying to win a championship, obviously. So who knows, right? Like, so if he is handled in the way where he's kept on that SKA KHL team and isn't really played much, it could rub him the wrong way where him and his agent are like, yeah, like get me out of here. Find any way possible to like get me out of this contract so I can come to the NHL.
That's what I was thinking. Exactly.
That's an interesting thing. But like, I'm gonna play total devil's advocate, and I think with all this benching stuff, like people, it's just a little bit like we got to remember, like it's preseason. So my thought process is this: personally, like I don't like he didn't play in one game in the preseason. He was used as a 13 forward in the other game. The best part about the 13th forward one, just before I go off, is he was used as a 13th forward. He gets like 5 minutes or whatever. He still scores in that game, which is like funny to me because so he got limited ice time, barely plays, gets spot duty in with some guys. He scores like the goal where like it's not a goal you'd expect him to score. Not to say that like he doesn't go to the dirty areas, but like most people say, oh, Michkov, he's not willing to go to the dirty areas. He's not willing to go to
his whole game.
That is his whole game. Yeah, it's just blown out of proportion type of narrative
he's more like Crosby than he is. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
that's okay. Yeah, but he's typically a guy that, or at least people will say the narrative wise that like Russians, they don't want to go to the net, they don't want to get dirty, stuff like that. That's the MO. Opposite type of goal. Literally, this guy cuts him through the middle, puck gets thrown to the net, drives straight to the net, has to tap it in front of the net with his backhand. He's like right in the crease in the dirty area where you score the goals. So like, I just thought that was hilarious. But to make my point, like with the preseason, look at the NHL. Like typically the way it works is, you play your younger guys at the beginning, close to the end of the preseason, which it is now, you're going to play closer to your real lineup. But sometimes not all your veterans or even your best players are going to play all the games. Yeah. So, like, I just see him like, okay, he missed one game. He played 13-4 the other game, but a lot of the other preseason games, he was top 6.
Yeah.
Or, like, in a prominent third-line role playing center. So, like, I just say, hey, it's preseason. Just because he missed one game, like, played limited, like, who knows? He was playing back-to-back games, playing a lot of games in a short period. Maybe they just wanted to give him some time. So, I think before we kind of jump to conclusions, always going to get loaned. He's going to, like, things are rocky in the KHL. Let's just see what happens to start the year.
100% agree. That's what I said. This is complete speculation, but I was really, because I agree 100% with that statement. Like, I think you're spot on there. The only caveat I had there is they did it to him last year.
That's true.
And he lit up the KHL. Like, he did very well for a guy his age. So, they are one of the better teams in the league from what I understand, right? I don't follow the KHL well. But they're obviously competing for a championship. I say it all the time, hockey's not a young man's game. They don't have an advantage. There's no advantage with being young, not 18, 19. There's an advantage on having experience, size, filling out, iterating on your skill sets and getting better at them. That's the reality. That's how you get better at everything. And, you peak at a certain point, and that has changed somewhat. That's, moved forward to 27 rather than 30 back in the day. Right. But, again, they're not like kids at that point. So, I don't know. I just think it's interesting because they moved him around last year. And if they do that again this year, I could see him being like, well, they're just going to do this shit to me over and over again. It's like, again, they have a relationship with this guy too. So it's definitely wishful thinking for me that he wants out of there quickly. I think
That'd be the best case scenario for the Flyers, obviously.
Yeah. But we still don't know how he could even pull that off. And we also know all the problems with Russia. We also know the KHL is not going to want him to leave anyway.
It'll be
might be easier because he's just a kid rather than Fedotov being a champion goaltender in their league. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see.
It's something we'll have to watch. I feel like the Michkov thing, like it's gonna be like a saga throughout this whole season with him, right?
And I'll be an idiot about it, jumping on every little thing that's like, ooh, you know what I mean? Because until we hear anything definitive, which we pretty much probably will not for months at a time, months at a time, we probably won't hear anything definitive at all till the off season. We won't hear like
it's all speculative, really.
Yeah. But still, it's fun to talk about, and I'm always thinking of ways that maybe we can get him here over earlier, because I can't see a scenario where the Flyers won't be trying every year. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, why not, right? When you have him under your control, technically, and he's your property. Yeah. I mean, you're going to want to try to sign him
legally and amicably, right? So why not just start now, and keep your ear to the ground there and see if there's any opportunities. They're going to constantly look for that. I don't think they're going to try to be obnoxious about it, but after this season, I could see the Flyers starting to get hungry. All right, let's move into the next topic. And this is something, brought up earlier. The rookie game is here, almost here, in about 2 weeks as we talk right now, slightly over. The first, rookie camp opens on the 14th, right?
Yeah.
Opens on the 14th. First game, I think both games against the Rangers. First game on Friday, second game on Saturday, both in Allentown. Sam Wismer, I just got approval to send her there, so she'll be on the ground there covering the games, which is awesome. So we'll have coverage on the ground. But let's get excited. I mean, it's right here, dude. Like, two weeks away. We're going to be watching Flyers hockey. I imagine both games will be broadcasted somehow, online.
I think it'll be probably on the Flyers site, like similar to the Dev Camp.
They'll have because there's going to be people in the stadium.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's in Allentown, so they're going to fill it.
They broadcast them last year too. So there'll be a way to watch for sure.
Yeah, and I'm excited for that. So who do you think will stand out? I think we already kind of know some names. I think Brink, Forrester, and Andre are locks to stand out and play big roles. And a dark horse for me, somebody I've been thinking about lately, is Avon, J.R. Avon. Because of his skating, it's such an X factor for a guy who can move at that speed that I don't think he's NHL ready or anything, but I could see him capturing some eyes just with his ability to really jet up and down the ice. And if they move him even a wing, and play him with Tyson Forrester or something like that, guys who have skill, I could see him getting the puck, right? He's been playing against a bunch of rookies. So he's a dark horse for me. I'm sure there's some others, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I think who you mentioned, I mean, I expect to likely stand out, like Brink, Forrester, Andre, guys that, have had time in the AHL in terms of Brink and Forrester, and then obviously Andre in the SHL, and obviously a little bit of time in the AHL. It just makes sense, in a rookie game, that they're going to be guys that, stand out, just for the fact they played in those leagues and did fairly well. Also, Desnoyers, I'm expecting will likely be in the game as well. So I believe he'll probably stand out too.
Yeah, you're right.
I'd imagine York won't be in the game this year. I'd be surprised if he is. Yeah, so obviously if he is, obviously if he is, but he's not going to be most likely. And then I think Avon was a good one as well. I wonder if Massimo Rizzo, I'm interested to kind of see him, just because they just acquired him. So
is he gonna play in it?
I don't know if he would be in it.
Doesn't have a contract, right?
I believe technically he would be under contract, right? Or no?
He doesn't have a contract. They own him. They
own him. Okay, so I guess they'll have to sign him.
I don't think he has to have a contract. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. I don't think he has to have a contract. It's dev camp. It's rookie dev camp. He doesn't have to have a contract, but he's a college guy and he's an overager. But I would hope that he is invited. I think you're right.
Hopefully, and then a couple other guys I'll be looking at. will be Gendron, because he's going to be with the Phantoms most likely, I'd imagine. And then I don't know if the college guys can make it, right? Like I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
I don't
Like I
think
wouldn't
so.
expect no Cutter Gauthier, obviously no
Yeah,
Michkov.
I was gonna say Hunter McDonald because I know he played really well at Dev Camp
Ooh,
on
I
defense, but
can't see the
he's
college
going
guys
he's
coming.
going to Northeastern University,
Yeah,
so probably not.
because they
But
start. Don't they start their camps earlier?
yeah,
Like, don't they start now?
it'll be like next week or something
Because
like that.
college starts like
Yeah,
now.
literally, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's probably it just in terms of guys who we'll see. I mean, Helga Grans too. I'm interested just to kind of take a look at
Grans,
him.
you see where Yinning is.
Yeah,
Who else will probably play? None of the goalies that we've seen.
I'd imagine Lixell won't play, right?
That don't might he might. He's still a rookie, but it might. I don't know. It depends how many bodies they could probably get.
Yeah,
Like
because like you got
Is
it's
Adard gonna
because
play?
like
Probably.
the rookie game's weird because like it's a weird game in the sense like you don't actually have to be like a fucking rookie to play. Like last
Yeah.
year, like Wade Allison played in the rookie game and he's like
Right.
24 or 25.
Right.
Like you can really put anybody in there. So I'm just wondering like who do
Well,
we
I think it
expect?
depends on the bodies too, right? They have to like guys have to be available. Flash have a lot of the guys in the NCAA,
Mhm.
right? They have guys in Europe,
Yeah,
right? They have guys already playing in leagues around the
yeah,
league. You know what I mean? So I think realistically, we're gonna see something closer to the Phantoms lineup. Like I
that's what I
imagine
mean. Yeah.
Wisdom will play,
Oh yeah, of course.
right? Zayd Wisdom will play. Like you said, Denoyer. I can't believe I forgot Denoyer. Denoyer will definitely be there. Tuamala will be playing.
Yeah,
Who else will we see?
I guess maybe
Brandon Fury. Brandon
Smolek
Fury.
too, maybe.
Yeah, Smolek will be playing. Brandon Fury will be playing. Maybe Mason Millman.
Yeah.
Um, maybe who else am I thinking? Oh, Ethan Sampson will definitely be
Oh
there.
yeah,
He
100%.
will definitely be
Definitely.
there. And actually, I'm really excited to see Ethan. He's such an X factor, dude. Like we've been talking
Yeah.
about, and obviously we know his father Sean, and like we've been just if you look at him as a prospect with what he's done, he wouldn't have gone in the 7th round as a redraft. I'm not saying he would have
Yeah.
gone in the top 3 rounds, but he might have been in a 4th, 5th round pick. He has, I would say, slightly exceeded expectations
Yeah.
for where he was taken.
Well, you got to look at it, right? Like he's a 6th round pick, 2021.
He's
Like
big.
every single year
It
he's
was sick. It
improved.
was 6th round. I thought it was
Yeah.
7th. Or something.
Seventh, sixth. It's similar.
6th it matters to me.
Yeah. But either way, I mean, like, look at his first season in the WHL, 12 or 7 points in 61 games. Second season in 22 games, 12 points. That's obviously the COVID year. 2021 22, 68 games, 46 points. Or 43 or 68 games, 43 points. Sorry about that. And then last season, 60 games, 60 points, point a game. So like you look at it that way, he's literally improving every year. But even his plus minus is improving too, right? Like it's not the best stat to look at, but like
Yeah.
in 2021-22, he was a minus 23, and last season he's a plus 11. So like he's been getting better every year. And there's one thing too that like you can't teach his size, right? Like he's 6'3", 183, but he also is a guy that can move the puck in transition, good offensive skills, as we can see from his improvement offensively year by year. So I think he's a guy that like I wouldn't be surprised to see him continue to improve with the Phantoms, which is a good thing for the Flyers, obviously, especially at such a late pick. So
Yeah, dude. I like him because you look at what Helga Grans brings, right? Who's a higher pick.
yeah,
And he has a lot of the same skill. I mean, he's got a lot of the same skills. He's got the similar size. I'm just saying it's an interesting prospect. He's a right-handed defender. He has a two-way game. If they can develop him, his size alone makes him interesting. And and the fact that he has been progressing as a more offensive player, like Wyatt Wiley had pretty decent size. He was a right-handed defender with two-way ability, but it wasn't that big. And that's kind of the problem with the NHL is like you need to have an element of your game that separates you from
makes you stand out. Exactly.
Right. And his size does give him an edge over somebody like Wyatt Wiley, right? If he can be tenacious, which is the hardest part, especially against men, and he can not be intimidated and carry a mean attitude, which 100% is why Ronnie Attard is getting such a look because he brings the attitude with his abilities. If Ethan Sampson can show that, I think he'll get noticed, and I think Ian LaPerriere would love that. So he's a guy. He's just a complete X factor for me. I could see him being a potential steal in the sense that he could be, in the bottom 6 of an NHL lineup.
Agreed.
And putting up 20 points a year or something like that in the NHL.
And for
playing good D.
for a 6th round pick, like you hit tremendously on value there. So
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of players to watch in terms of rookie camp too, and just also to compare to dev camp, right? Because we saw some of these guys at dev camp. It'll be interesting to see like if there's any changes or if we notice anything different over a whole summer of training too. So
yeah, and it's such a big deal. So like the people who've been listening for a while already know this, but I'm like super into fitness. I'm like crazy about it. I've talked about dieting and all that stuff. And you think about the amount of time, they actually don't have that much time to gain muscle mass. But you do look at their ages. Most players in their mid-20s, they're not going to be adding a ton of weight. It's just not a thing. Like you don't really want to get heavier, especially in today's game. But a lot of these guys come in like too thin, right? They got to fill out.
Yeah.
So every offseason, they have about at most 2 months to gain muscle mass. Once the season starts and all that training, you have very little time to weight train. You're mostly doing cardio. That's why most guys come in at a certain weight, and then during the season they drop weight anyway because they're in cardio. You cannot work out in between
games.
Yeah, you're not working out in between games because you're gonna destroy your body. Like
you're practicing too
about
and
recovery.
Games,
so they have about 2 months to gain that. Now, depending on your muscle mass, so just give people an example, right? If you are Travis Konechny, if you gain 5 to 10 pounds of muscle, that is insane. Like I'm talking about muscle, not fat. But you look at a guy who's not very big. I've stood in front of Konechny. He's like 5'9". He's wide, but he's not tall. He's much thicker than I am. But if he gains 10 pounds of muscle, it's a lot. And they could potentially do that, but that's so difficult to do. But if they gain 5, look for a huge difference. Like look for that in the season. If you see guys coming in heavier, I mean that honestly. And I'm talking about young guys in this case, like guys in their early 20s. If they're coming in heavier, be excited about that because that means they had time. They put in the work. They got bigger and stronger, which they all need to do. And that's like just to make the NHL, you need to become more man strength, like without a doubt. And you saw like Travis Sanheim took him longer to make the NHL because he's so thin and frail in comparison to other guys at 6'3". He doesn't have a wide build. So adding 10 pounds to him is insane, right? So you have to look at the body types too. So if they're really big and they add 5 pounds, if they're a 6'4" guy, that's nothing. It's not a difference. They're not even going to talk about their weight. But if you're seeing small, frail guys and they added weight, and for somebody we're all looking forward to, Joel Farabee, right? He's very thin. Both of his brothers filled out later. They're taller than him, and they both filled out considerably. Look for a guy like that to fill out. And if Joel Farabee comes in thick, he probably is going to have a really good season because he's not like a speedster to begin with. He just has to get stronger and better on his edges. So with other young guys, look for that. That's all I'm saying. Look for that that's what dev camp is for, is to look to see what kind of shape are they coming in, right? And does that strength show in the game? Because the skills element, they obviously build in the offseason too, but that's always a thing. Eventually their body needs to catch up. Otherwise, injuries and inability to make it through towards camp.
Yeah, exactly. I think rookie camp is going to be really interesting. I'm excited. It's like a couple weeks, so we get to watch some hockey, which is good.
Yeah. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see, like there are a lot of guys I'm hoping that we become the attitude that I used to see back in the day where guys would come in tremendously early and just start showing up to camp like way too early. And are just at the rink every day with the other guys. This team needs to become that. It's not the expectation that everybody come from home and the entire team. Like there are people there's complications with seeing family because you're not going to see them, right? If they live overseas, you're not going to see them all year pretty much if you don't see them now. But like if you are not in that situation, I'm hoping that you are on site. And I'm expecting that is the attitude the Flyers are putting forward. And I think it begins at dev camp. And when these kids get here at dev camp, I want to see the NHL players on the ice here all together in advance, not waiting till their window, but to be here. With
John Tortorella as the coach, I think he kind of forces you to be here a little bit early. So I would be surprised to see a lot of guys.
Well, they don't they don't use a puck for like the first 2-3 days of camp anyway.
Yeah,
so you want to get
exactly.
on the ice and play hockey
A
because
little
he's
bit,
just going to
yeah.
grind you down with cardio,
Very true.
which is psychotic and awesome at the same time. It's actually
I'm interested to see if he does the no puck thing like for as many days. I think he did it for 2 or 3 days. Maybe it's only going to be one this time. We'll see.
the one thing I do expect this year is for him to be less frustrated at camp than he was last year.
Yeah, I could definitely see
where
that.
it's not as much of a shock of where the team.
But also he knows a lot of the players too. Like I think last year he
and
really
they
didn't
know what to expect.
But I think last year he really didn't know anybody. Like literally, like didn't know the prospects, didn't know who these guys even were, what their names were.
Even
like
Tim Atkinson, he knew and wasn't even around.
Yeah, right. So like I think now just the fact that he has more of a grasp of like, okay, like I've seen this guy, I know what he can bring. Let me put him in the situation I want to see it. You know what I mean? It could be more beneficial too, even for players, just in terms of like, okay, I know what to expect now, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So hell yeah, rookie camp. So can't wait. So yeah, we'll do a review of that game on here. After that, so definitely check it out. Maybe we'll do a separate video for it. Actually, that might be a good separate video just to hop on and do a review of either each game or maybe both games. We'll figure it out. Okay. Next topic I have. So for those who are not familiar, who Steve Dangle is, Steve Dangle is a member of Sportsnet, or he might have left recently.
Yeah, he left, and now he's doing his own thing.
Yeah, but he had his own brand, and that's how he got the job at Sportsnet. It's Steve Dangle, and he used to do reviews of every Toronto Maple Leafs game.
Crazy reviews.
Losing
his mind.
Yeah,
type
he
shit.
is incredibly entertaining. I do highly recommend Steve Dangle. You will not agree with him on everything, but he is absolutely entertaining, and he has built a network with his friends, and they have grown. So if you guys don't know who they are, definitely check them out. But they've actually grown considerably. Chris Johnson has a show on their YouTube channel now. They're like near 100,000 subscribers. Like they have grown to become their own entity, which is why he was able to leave Sportsnet and do his own thing. So those who are not aware, so they had a review a preview of the Flyers' upcoming season. And the person who did it is this guy named Grav, and he's actually from a separate YouTube channel. He has his own. He's a younger guy, but he does work with Sportsnet as well. Probably built a relationship with Steve Dangle, so he was probably doing one of their previews. He has a lot of great content too. I think his YouTube is called Gravith, and I think he goes by Grab. Young guy, but he does a lot of content. I would also check out his thing. Now, I want to talk about his review, and then there's also another guy, and we'll talk about his season preview, and they're different, and that's why I want to bring them up. The hockey guy, if guys who are not aware, the hockey guy is bigger than all of them. He has about close to 300 subscribers on YouTube, super relaxed, does everything on a whiteboard. This guy is incredible. He watches every team. He knows something about every team. He's been on Sportsnet. He's doing his own thing. If you guys don't know who he is fantastic. He covers everything, and he will have a video about every single piece of content. Maybe his attitude's not for you because he's pretty laid back, but he's awesome. So 2 different videos. Let's talk about the Steve Dangle network the Steve Dangle podcast network first, and then we'll talk about the hockey guy one. So just a couple things to take out from that, the Steve Dangle one. So Grav calls Frost top line center on the team. He said he expects Sean Couturier to have a 40 to 50 point season. And then he goes a classic Coots season, which I started chuckling at. And then he graded the offense a C+, which I thought was fair. He graded the defense a D, which I also think is somewhat fair. And he gave the goaltending a B, but said that beyond hard, it isn't good. He also says there's no way this team is good. And that was pretty much like the takeaway from it. Now, he doesn't hate every element of the Flyers. But to him, this team is not good, and there are no good players on it, really. The things I want to point out there, Frost being a top line center on this team is inaccurate. Coots, a 40 or 50 point player, is also completely inaccurate. It seriously injured, he puts up 40 points. Yeah. We've seen him with a torn meniscus put up 8 points in a game.
We've seen him score a hat trick on one knee before.
Yeah, exactly. So let's be honest, Couturier is a 70 to 90 point player, especially in today's NHL. So I don't know what he's talking about there. The forward group giving it a C plus. I think he's right, but I would give them a B minus in potential. The D, he gave it a D, or the defense, he gave a D. I think that's pretty close. I would have given
that's
like
accurate.
D plus at most. And then the goaltending, where's the mention of Ersan at all?
Yeah.
Like whatsoever. He just like talked about Pettersson as being the backup. It's like, dude, that's our like third string.
I feel like Sandstrom and Ersan have a better chance to be the backup than Pettersson, most likely. So
that's what I was saying. And again, I don't want to shit on Pettersson, but like that's just not accurate. And then he says there's no way this team's getting good. Yeah. And what I take away from that is like injuries were a huge problem with this team. The question marks still remain. I'm not saying that the team will be good, but there's no way they'll be competitive. I just think they're severely underestimated.
Yeah.
And I think that is the average opinion is what he put forth.
100%. Well, that's what I mean. Like, I'm not really surprised because like this is more to me like seeing somebody typical.
Typical analysis of the Flyers.
Well, this is a national media type narrative, right? Like, look at every single season preview that's going to be coming out from every single national media outlet. Like, even look at NHL.com's previews, look at fucking ESPN's previews, look at Sportsnet's. They're going to have the Flyers bottom of the Metro Division.
Yes.
1000%.
Without a doubt.
I already know. So, like,
I understandably so.
Yeah. Me hearing this, I mean, does not surprise me. It's just interesting, though, because, like, it's clear that these guys aren't keyed in and they're probably not watching the Flyers, so they're not aware. And that's why this narrative is being kind of put out there, right? Because it's the narrative nationally. And when you're not tuning in on a game-to-game basis, you're unable to kind of see the potential in some of the players, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens. But it is what it is. Like, personally, it's interesting for him to say Frost was the first line center. I mean, he's not wrong in terms of if you look at the lineup last season. Like, at a point, like, he was getting used almost as the first line center.
Yeah.
But now that we go into the upcoming season, the fact he doesn't have a contract already, that kind of already points to the fact he's not going to be used anywhere close to that.
Yeah, it's like, dude, way to not read the team right.
But then also, too,
it's not all his fault, but I'll mention that in a second. Finish your thoughts. Sorry.
Yeah. Also, too, I mean, like, you see Cates, he's probably going to get more usage. Couturier is going to be used as the first line center. I mean, unless like he's hurt or like there's some reason where he says like, okay, like I'm not feeling 100%. We need to like do like some load management type of stuff. Like I like 100% see Couturier being used as a first line guy. Like he's a Tortorella player. Like we know what John Tortorella likes, and Sean Couturier is a definite mold of that, just in terms of two-way game, leadership, all that type of stuff. In terms of like the C plus for offense, I think I would have put it at a B minus. But the caveat for me is just that the health. Yeah, like if Couturier and Atkinson aren't healthy, then like
they ain't a B minus.
C plus or C, probably like C range for me if they didn't have those guys. Yep. The defense is a D, like that's fair. I mean, I think it could be a D plus, like if some of the younger guys make it, like if you have Andre on there, Zamula, like I think they could add a little more.
I mean, if Sanheim rebounds,
that too, yeah. Obviously,
you know what I mean? There's just too many question marks to say definitively they'll be a D.
But I see where
I don't think they'll be better than a C minus. I don't think.
Yeah,
like that's the ceiling is like
which is
slightly below average.
Yeah,
you know
which isn't the greatest. The goalie is kind of funny just because like a B's solid. I mean, I would agree. Like B, just because like you don't really know how it's going to play out.
It's higher. I would say it's much. I see. My thing with the depth that they have and the fact that Carter Hart's their starter, and the fact that there are literally a 23-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 26-year-old, a 27-year-old, and they all have NHL experience. Well, that's a minus to me.
Yeah, I would say a B plus is fair. The only reason is because the defense is going to could probably bring the goalies down a bit.
That's fair.
It all is like.
But we have to isolate it, right? We could say that the offense will bring the defense up because I just mentioned earlier in the podcast, like you talk about matching up against McDavid. If you have Noah Cates and Sean Couturier, those are two guys who are capable of shutting down the best players in the world. You can play to your strength, which is defense on offense, and try to play around that. Again, that's the thing I think could save the Flyers from being in that bottom, like maybe they can be that 10 to 15 range. I'm not saying that's even where we want them to be, but we have no control. And if
but,
things go well for them, that's kind of where I see them.
My thought is like, I think they'll be closer. Like if we're looking at standings in just the Eastern Conference, I think they'll be closer to that, like, 11th to 8th than they will be like last in the Eastern Conference if Couturier and Atkinson are healthy. If those guys are healthy, then like I could see them being bottom 5.
Right.
But it really depends.
Right. Exactly. And I think if they're not healthy, we're definitely bottom 5.
Yeah, and I think too the young guys like him there's real like he mentions Frost, but like personally, I would have mentioned Tippett over Frost in terms of like, okay, like
there was no mention of Tippett.
Who's gonna break out next season for the Flyers? Like this guy just had a 27-goal season and essentially like his first full year in the NHL. Like there's potential for him to get to 35 goals here. Like that should be talked about, right?
Well, he defensively, he mentioned trading Travis Konechny, trading Scott Laughton as potentials.
I mean, if they're really
didn't really talk about. So, in his fairness, the lines that he was showing are on Daily Faceoff, and what they have on Daily Faceoff is Joel Farabee, Morgan Frost, Owen Tippett as the top line. Second line, again, I don't really get it. Scott Laughton, Sean Couturier, Travis Konechny. How is that the second line? What world? The best 2 players on the second line. And then Cam Atkinson, Noah Cates, Wade Allison as the third line, Nicholas Deslauriers, Ryan Poehling, and Garnet Hathaway as the fourth. Yeah. I don't think it's like a disaster, but that's
not getting updated. I don't think.
I mean, they have nothing to really update it off of, right? Their defensive pairings are Sanheim, Risto top pairing, Mark Stahl on the left, Cam York on the right, Nick Seeler on the left, and Sean Walker on the right. I can't see those being the pairings either. So again, in fairness to him, he's going off of that. And it shows. And I'm sure Daily Faceoff will have those updated, but they have nothing to gauge, right? It just outside.
Usually like
they're going off of last season,
training camp and preseason, and they'll update, right?
Well, they're altering it, right? Because if Noah Cates is with Scott Laughton and Travis Konechny, that could be a second line, right?
Yeah.
Rather than the first line, it's like they're kind of mixing in last year's lines with today. But as we've seen the season previews, we showed you it with Bill Meltzer already. We've reviewed it for you several times. We do not project the lineup like that. So
there's a lot more depth than that, I would say. Yeah. And just the way the players will be used.
And also Tyson Forrester is not included in this mix, and he's a huge X factor. And he's a guy, and Chris and I were talking about this. Tyson Forrester could end up being a top line player on this team. Like, you could shift TK over to the left side and have TK, Coots, and Forrester. That's a pretty badass.
Yeah. I mean, he's a right-handed shot, TK, right? So it makes sense that you would put him there. Even Forrester, I wouldn't mind to see like on that off.
He hasn't played in the NHL much. So
as a rookie.
But they did it with Cam York. So it's all about roles, right? If a role is open and like they're not going to look at it, he can't do it. You're right. They might be like, well, why don't we try? He's got a big shot. Why don't we open him up? Let's see if he can do it. He can work around the net. It's like, could work. Yeah. All right. So the other video, in contrast, this is the Hockey Guys video. So here's some takeaways I had from him. So he loves the Flyers goaltending. Mentioned Ersan as well. Mentioned that he goes, if you've been watching the Flyers, he's like, you will know. He's like, people are saying Carter Hart's a problem. He goes, he is absolutely not the problem. He goes, Carter Hart is the best player. Like essentially he's going like Carter Hart's the best player on this team.
They've won a handful of games just because of him, pretty much.
And he said Ersan was also awesome. And said that with those 2 combinations, the Flyers have excellent goaltending.
Yeah.
Again, I can't disagree. It's the best situation the Flyers have been in goaltending in 10 years, maybe more.
Yeah.
Easily.
Probably 20 years.
Easily. Anybody tells you otherwise, short-term memory.
Yeah.
That every single time we've had problems with goalies. We didn't have young guys. If we did, we had one young guy that we traded for.
Well, we
brought in-house, Steve Mason.
I'm not even thinking about like just the NHL. Like, look at the whole depth chart. Just like it's stacked.
Roll through Kolosov, Fedotov. Like
Yarnison, Zabragin, all those guys. Yeah, right?
It's like this is not like the Flyers are not that's not a question mark. If you look at that depth and you question it, it's because you don't know the players on the list.
Yeah. Once again,
that's what I would say.
Once again, like I said,
Carter Hart. That's it.
It's narrative, right? Like the Flyers have always been known to be that team where the goalies haven't been the greatest. So
you're just
everybody loves to go back to it. So
and the reason I want to show this is like again, the hockey guy is legit. He doesn't always get everything right, but you can tell when someone's actually paying attention. That's my point.
Yeah, you can see
right?
like one guy's kind of going off the narrative of like
Oh.
national media and how they think of the Flyers. The other guy's going off, well, I watched the Flyers play last season.
He watches
and I know
everything.
that these guys are better than what, most would assume, right?
Yeah. So. And he does a lot of research too. He does great videos. And he calls Tyson Forrester a fantasy dark horse. He said he's a guy you definitely he's like don't
Calder.
He's like, don't overblow the 7 points in 8 games because you don't know it's a small sample size, but still the guy's a dark horse. He has absolute potential to, make some noise. So you should look out for him. Again, another call out. And then he picked the MVP of the team. And this is my favorite part of the video. He picked TK and he goes, I think TK is the MVP. However, he goes, if Sean Couturier is healthy, he goes, this season's going to be very interesting. That's what he said. He goes, because Sean Couturier is one of the best two-way players in the NHL. He didn't mince words.
100%.
This is not a guy who's a Flyers fan. Actually, he's Vancouver Canucks fan. He lives in Vancouver. He's just being honest with what he sees. People who tell you that Sean Couturier, like, that's why I see this stuff on the second line, all this, like, I just roll my eyes. I get it, the injury and all that, but why don't you wait to see if he's injured first before you downgrade him? But go off of his previous performance, which is top line center in the NHL. And again, he says, and I'll let you say right here, he says himself that Sean Couturier being part of this team is a humongous impact. And he said he would be my MVP if I knew he was healthy.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, like, that's my feelings too. Like, if you look at Couturier,
this video was spot on.
If you look at Couturier, before he got hurt, he was the Flyers' best player for multiple seasons. I mean, you could argue that 102-point season, it was Giroux just because he was fucking insane that year. But surrounding all those years, even with Giroux, Couturier was helping him score as much because he was freeing him up on the defensive side and doing all the little things that Giroux used to have to essentially do. But yeah, like, I think that's a spot on analysis, right? Like, if Couturier is healthy, like, I have no doubts that he likely will be MVP just because of not only the impact he can have offensively, but the impact he can have defensively and at the faceoff dot and with the leadership factored in. So just the total package for a young team kind of looking to build on a building block that was the prior season last year in Tortorella's first year as the coach. So I think it's accurate. And I also think, like, you're right in the sense that, like, we shouldn't just because he had those 2 injuries, like, they're certainly a factor and you have to account for them, but we shouldn't assume the worst immediately. That he's like, oh, well, he's a 45-point guy because he had 2 back surgeries. Well, like, he could be. Like, I can acknowledge the fact that 2 back surgeries,
risk is there,
like, could make you and your play fall off a cliff. That's totally reasonable to say that, but, like, until we actually see the guy play, let's not assume, like you're saying, right? So, like, I put him in that, I don't think he's going to be a point a game this season, personally, but I do think that, like, he's going to hover between, like, 65, 75 points. It might take him some time to get back to the groove of things. Personally, for me, I'm going to make my judgments on Couturier, like, once I see some of the preseason games and just how he looks.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Like, I just want to see him on the ice.
I think we all are in that boat a little bit. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And then we can kind of make our assessments from there. But to label him 45 points, like the other video, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like that narrative thing. Now, what I like that he pointed out too, and this is something I've been saying about Couturier, is that he, we talk about a captain for this team, his health, like, I don't know if he's going to be captain. I have no idea, but you can see that with Couturier in the lineup, they take his identity. I don't know if people realize that. I mean, Vasili's pointed out the number. What was it, a full point differential or half point on each point goals a game more? And half a point less or half a goal less a game with him in the lineup, right?
I think it was something like with him in the lineup, like the last season he played in 2021, up to December, they were like 500 with him in the lineup, and then without him, they were like 1-8 or something.
Yeah.
So that just shows the difference. Like, you're a team treading water in the mix, competitive every night, or you're literally garbage.
And again, this is what I talk about. That's how big of an impact the number 1 center is. I still think it is the most important role on the team.
It is.
It's my personal opinion. People might not agree with me, but because they play offense and defense, and so did that number one defenseman. But if you can't drive offense in the offensive zone, you're not doing it. You can find guys who can play D and collapse around a goalie, but if you can't drive offense against best players in the world, you're not making it far.
Or at least control the flow of the game. Like without a first line center, you're constantly playing catch up because you're having guys that are playing out of position, essentially. Like that's what we saw last season with Kevin Hayes playing first line for as long as he did. Like, sure, he's kind of holding his own, he's playing okay, but he shouldn't be a guy going up against those top line talents. He should be playing against second line players, third line players.
Absolutely.
And I mean, Couturier is a guy that can play against those top line players. So you're kind of like with him, if he comes back and he gets to that level or close to where he used to be, you're almost slotting guys in a better position, right? Like you have him playing against the top lines. You could have Cates and Frost against your second, third lines. Those guys should probably be playing against those players more than
it changes the entire dynamic. Of
more
team.
than same first line players. So.
Same with the number one defenseman. Like, don't get me wrong. It's like the way I see it is like the most important is number one defenseman. Second most important is number one. I'm sorry, number one center is number one. No, and number one defenseman is number two. And then you can make a case that it's the goaltender is the third most, but I would actually argue it's not, unfortunately. I would actually argue it's probably either the second line center or your number two defenseman.
Yeah. Those are all fair arguments.
Because of what I talked about, where you can compensate for not having an elite goaltender. You cannot compensate for not having an elite defender or elite number one center. There is no compensation for it. You can't, you can try, but you realistically probably will not win a cup.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you can win a cup without a number one goalie, as we've seen, right? Without like a elite goalie. I still consider the number ones. If you won a cup, you deserve that title, in my opinion. You're in the top 30 goalies, right?
Yeah,
like,
100%.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I thought those were interesting. Check out those videos, comment if you guys want to on your thoughts on that stuff. But I just find it really interesting. There's a lot of narratives. Now, the hockey guy did say he doesn't expect them to be a playoff team. He said they could be really bad this year. Fine. We all acknowledge that. But you have to analyze it properly and talk about what is really good.
What could go right.
Yes. Right? So. But and I talk about it all the time. If you do not talk about the full spectrum of options, your argument falters. Right? Because you have to acknowledge the good and the bad to come up with a logical conclusion.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your argument will come off illogical, where somebody like myself or yourself or the listeners to this podcast will listen to you and be like, okay, I mean, like I hear you, but that you missed a bunch of points.
Well, it's just not a fair analysis.
Even if they're bad, you didn't analyze it properly.
Yeah.
It's like you can tell me 2 + 2 = 4 or whatever. You can look at a mathematical equation, but can you explain it to me properly is why it actually equals that way. Yeah. All right, let's go into the last topic of this, and this is for funsies. So this was a good topic, Vasili. You brought this up. We were kind of just talking a little bit. And we were looking at the UFA market and what players still available, and we see PTOs starting handing out
a lot of them.
a lot of them going out. It's because there's a lot of names available. And again, this is that whole bullshit young man's league where I talk about this is more of an issue of salary cap than it is young man's league.
Whereas, if there was salary room, like, do we really think Thomas Tatar would be unsigned right now?
Or Patrick Kane?
Yeah, for that matter, exactly.
And I know Kane wants to take his time, make his decision, all that, but it's like, it's obviously there's issues with cap if he waits longer.
Well, you got to think about it this way, right? Like, if there wasn't a salary cap and you could pay anybody whatever and it didn't matter, you think one of the richest teams in the league would have been like, hey, Patrick Kane, here's a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
Come help us win a cup. Like, they would have done that.
Here's
right?
$7 million, $8 million, come win a cup.
Here's something nobody else would pay you for you to come play for us.
The Rangers, the Flyers. I mean, maybe we wouldn't do that right now, but...
Well, like the Avalanche, like you think the Tampa Bay Lightning, who want another cup desperately, aren't going to be like, come play with Stamkos and Kucherov and help us win.
Right.
Like,
there's a lot of these guys who probably would have be getting NHL contracts and thrown in the mix if the team could hold on to them, but they can't. I'm excited for the cap to go up. Really am.
I think it'll make the league a better place, more competitive. And then ultimately for players, it's a good thing because they get paid more money, which I think if you look at the NHL and the spectrum of the other professional sports, they're pretty much one of the lowest paid leagues where I think, players do deserve probably more of a raise in comparison to other leagues and how much those players are paid. So,
yeah, a big reason is people might not like this, but the salary cap, I mean, Gord Murphy has talked about this on TSN, and I completely agree with him. And I had the thought myself, and if they're going to say it, I'm going to say it too. They are grabbing elements of socialism, okay, which a government governmental practice, right? And putting that into the league. Now, there are benefits to it, which you can argue at the time it was 100% necessary, though I'm not 100% on board with that. But again, that's why it's a shared revenue league, right? This is why the cap doesn't go up. It's why everything's limited. Everybody's tied into this cap and shared revenue. As long as that's the case, even if the league is profitable, like they made $6 billion, their number is not that far away from the NBA. I think the NBA made $10 billion. Their highest paid player makes $50 million on they have smaller teams and everything too, and that matters. But realistically, the NHL players probably should be like McDavid should probably be in the 20s. Yeah. Realistically,
Matthews as well, like that echelon.
Yeah, like about $20 million a year. They're not. I don't think we'll ever get to basketball. Like, I don't think they're going to catch it. But you can see the stagnation that's happening to the NHL economy. And again, there were reasons that it happened. We all get it. But some teams do not need this, right? Like Toronto is not hurting financially. Edmonton, they could afford, like, these teams, they're going to sell
Boston, the Rangers, like there's a whole boatload of teams
right.
that
they can afford paying these guys this. They just can't because the restrictions for the other teams who financially cannot. And I'm not talking about just Arizona. There's a lot of teams who can't play players $20 million a year right now. So again, that's why it happened. It's ability to make the league more competitive, and it is what it is. I think I don't want to get rid of it. I think it's probably a mistake, but I think everybody looks at that luxury tax thing and goes, well, there needs to be
luxury tax,
a new element included.
My idea,
exactly what it is.
My idea personally, I've seen it parroted, and I think it's a really smart idea. Is any player you draft that's a homegrown player,
you can get a discount.
Yeah, like it should be. So let's say the max deal that you can give a homegrown player is like 10, like whatever
they do
it
that
is
today, right? It's 8 for homegrown, 7 for
that's year wise. Yeah. I think for salary, like for cap wise, it should be like, let's say you pay a guy, I don't know, 13 million. If he's homegrown, you get 25% off that. So you pay him 13 million, but it only counts this much towards the salary cap.
How about this?
Sure.
I just thought of this as you were talking because I liked what you said. What if they're allowed to provide a bonus that doesn't count against the cap?
That too could make sense.
And maybe up to a certain amount, like nothing that exceeds a certain amount, but it's like, hey, we can't compete with you on the Rangers or whatever can outbid, right, and pay and give you the years or whatever. You won 8 years at, I don't know, 10 million or whatever. And they can give that to you. We can't fit you in the cap for that. So why don't we give you 8 for 8, right? We get 2 million off, and we give you
a bonus because you're homegrown.
We'll give you a 5 million up front.
Yeah.
We'll give you 6 million up front. We'll just give you a big signing bonus. Again, and teams, again, if they have the revenue to give you an immediate amount of money, because that's what it is. It's different than your salary, which comes bi-weekly or whatever, right? You got to think about money inflow out. So teams that have
that's attractive for a player too, right? So.
Right, exactly. And maybe they won't get the 10 years 10. They'll get a smaller cap number to manage under the cap, but they will get that money up front. And most people want money up front anyway.
Yeah,
because you can invest the money and make more money that way. So
that's a good idea.
I have no idea if that's a good idea, but I made that up just now.
No, it's interesting. Like, there's a lot of things they could do. Like, I'm sure they have these discussions all the time. I would hope. I mean, like in terms of like the NHL, NHLPA, they definitely
it's just very difficult.
Because
they have to agree on
with the CBA in place and the union. Like, I know there's a new CBA coming up, so I'm wondering if any of this structure ends up getting
idea though, right?
Getting changed. No, it's not bad. Another thing I have is like
kind of like a luxury tax.
Yeah, another thing that I was thinking of that's similar to the NFL, where they have a franchise tag.
A tax on the bonus.
It's completely different to the franchise tag idea in the NFL, like just the way it works. I just like the name of it. So like, let's say you have one homegrown guy, you can put one franchise tag on one player. That player you put the franchise tag on, his cap hit does not affect your salary cap. So you have one guy that doesn't affect you.
That'd be cool.
You basically
like
get
your franchise guy.
That's your franchise guy. You can hold on to him. His salary.
You can pay him as much as
his salary cap doesn't affect your cap at all.
And every team, I think that's
every team gets one guy they can do that with.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
So
that's interesting. I don't know if that would ever work, but that's I like that a lot. So the thing I was thinking about that, if you pay that, because the luxury tax is the idea that you're paying a tax if you're going above the cap, right? Well, if you're paying this bonus, you should have to pay the NHL I don't know if equal amount, but some substantial percentage
Some
on
sort
top
of tax as well.
So not only are you paying the player more upfront, but if you want to leverage this, you have to put money into the NHL.
It's double duty. Like you really have to have the money for it.
And that way it feeds, I guess it takes away maybe from that escrow a little bit that the players have, and it keeps the cap going up because it goes into the
feeds the revenue.
Right. Yeah. Feeds revenue. Right. Overall revenue. Right.
Revenue sharing between
revenue
all
sharing.
30 teams,
exactly.
32
exactly. Because you're making a decision to go into your profits in the immediate and get rid of, keep a guy that you really want to keep. I like all this bullshitting because I don't know all the rules. So they might literally look at this and be like, this makes no sense under our contract.
We can't do any of this at all, but it sounds interesting, right? Like I hope it sounds interesting to the people listening. But
yeah, I mean, I definitely think we're on to something. There are always limitations. You implement we both work in tech, right? We both work in tech, right? So if you implement anything new in a new system, you will run into problems. So
yeah, exactly.
Like making any kind of change, there will be problems. So let's do this. I'm going to share my screen. We'll look at the UFA list here, and we'll bring up some names, and we'll see if there's anything good.
Just PTOs too that might catch our eye. Maybe the Flyers would be interested in. I personally, I mean, with all the young guys they have, I don't expect them to give out PTOs because I think like you're in a rebuilding stage. Let your young guys compete for your spots.
Yeah,
like why offer them to veteran players, but you never know if there's injuries, right? Like who knows what's going to happen in camp. So,
well, and again, they're trying to build a culture. And if there's any players out there in the Mark Stahl vein, right, that brings some kind of culture element and is willing to come to a team that isn't likely to make the playoffs, isn't likely to go for a cup. You know what I mean? So like Patrick Kane out, right? Like he's not.
Taves, I mean, he said he's taking the significant break.
Is Josh Bailey injured?
I'm not sure on
that. He's just holding out?
I don't know at all. I haven't really looked into it.
He's too good to be a PTO anywhere. Like I would be shocked if somebody didn't sign Josh Bailey. Like, yeah, he didn't have like the best of years last year, but he's still a good player.
Yeah, so Blackhawks got Bailey from the Islanders in some trade earlier.
Did? Okay.
At June 29th. And they
haven't signed him yet.
And then they bought him out. So that's why he's a free agent.
So I actually missed that story. So that is interesting because he's not a bad player and he's only 33 years old. That is a guy who should be at a PTO.
It's an interesting deal. So like basically what it was is the Islanders traded Bailey for a second round pick in 2026 to the Hawks. So for the Blackhawks, they're like, sure, we're rebuilding. We'll take any picks. And they just bought him out because they didn't want him because he had a 1-year deal at $5 million. He had 25 points in 64 games last year with the Islanders. So like, wasn't the greatest producer, so we'll see. I think he'll get a PTO for sure. I couldn't imagine him not, right? So
yeah, it'd be weird. He's a valuable player.
Unless he wants to retire. Like you never know with some players. Like he is I mean, actually, you know what? He's only 33. I thought he was older.
Yeah, he's still got a couple more years, so that's why I was surprised. I mean, I get why the Islanders would look to free up cap space, but I'm just surprised nobody picked him up. But he's a definite PTO contender if he wants to keep going. I don't think he'll be a PTO contender here. I think he's going to try to go to a playoff team because he's 33.
Colorado,
interesting name.
Always interests me for PTOs.
Yeah. Another name on here, and we talked about him earlier, Ethan Bear, who I have highlighted. He was 26 years old.
There were some rumors.
Yeah, there were some rumors, but again, relatively young defenseman. We do have an opening on the right side, kind of. I don't think the Flyers would be rushing to bring him in, but a PTO, I think they would be interested in a PTO for Ethan Bear if he'd be willing to do it.
I could definitely see that. I mean, my thought is just the fact he's a right-handed defenseman. He's only 26. Obviously, he's not the same offensive pedigree or even close to D'Angelo, but he's supposed to be like your guy that transitions up the ice, moves the puck for you. So they're losing some of that with Tony. So maybe they want to get some of that kind of skill set back. I think it would depend on a lot of the younger guys, right? Too, because I believe they might want to give some of their young guys on D a chance. But if it was rumored, Andre Zamula, but if it was rumored, there could be a reason as to why, maybe, right? So one that I thought was pretty interesting. I mean, Maxime Comtois, he's a younger player. Obviously, he hasn't had much success.
He's also part of the Hockey Canada investment.
Yeah, and that's why I think he probably hasn't been signed. There might be an inkling there. So that's probably why he's left. But I just thought that was interesting, just for him only.
I would be interested if
him only being
implicated.
Yeah, because he's only 24, and there's tons of potential in his game.
And he's been a captain. He, from what we thought, he had good
Yeah,
character.
but who obviously knows, right? Like we still haven't had any news on that Hockey Canada stuff, and I mean, with the fact that the season's coming up, I don't. Yeah, well, you'd imagine that they're going to want to tell teams as soon as possible so they can deal with the suspensions. The fact they haven't told them yet makes me believe that they're probably not going to figure it out anytime soon. So
yeah, I'm still not 100% that there will be any suspensions. Like again, I don't know anything. I barely have paid attention to this case. I'm not an expert on this, but I just think it's been so long. They don't have anything announced. They have nobody named. You're going to the end. Like, what are you going to do?
Well, there has to be legitimate charges from a legal perspective.
That's what I'm saying.
There was legitimate charges, then they would have to announce something. The fact there has not been anything named yet, that leads me to believe, like I said, that it's going to be a kind of a limbo effect. The guy that interests me the most on this list is Jesse Puljujarvi.
Yeah.
He's 25, unsigned, obviously very underwhelming in terms of where he was selected.
Former third overall.
Right? Yeah, I don't know how many chances he's gonna have. I don't know if the Flyers are a team that would give him a chance. Like probably not. I just look at like Tortorella, and I don't think he's a guy.
Not Forrester in the mix.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you look at Tortorella, right? Like,
and look at the right side on our team.
Yeah, like he's just not a Tortorella type player. I don't think. Just
quite frankly. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Wade Allison has outperformed him. He's a year older.
Yeah, exactly right. So I just don't think that it makes sense from the Flyers perspective. But I would be surprised if another team doesn't sign him.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I'd
give him an offer. So
what I could see happening is I could see him playing a year in Europe, trying to build his reputation back up.
That too, yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean.
One that's interesting. I don't know if he's going to retire. I'm not sure that he's mentioned anything. But Paul Stastny, like. That's interesting to me just because he's a veteran guy. Like ultimately you probably see him go
38 this year.
Yeah. Well, like 22 points at 37 playing on the fourth line. Like it's not bad at all. He has tons of experience, was like a top of the lineup type player for Colorado for years before he kind of,
I loved him. He was
before he kind of stopped moving around a bit. So it'll be interesting to see what he does if he ends up retiring. Like, I don't think he's
Bill Gessel's on here too.
Yeah, right. I don't think
he's in that same boat.
I don't think Stastny's a candidate for the Flyers at all. No. But I mean, if somebody's injured, like if Couturier ends up getting hurt, you never know what'll happen.
They could. Yeah, you might be right. I mean, there's a lot of injured players on here, guys who had like Nolan Patrick's on here. We know
he's not playing.
He's not gonna be. Yeah, he's not gonna be playing again this year. So
Kiefer Bellows, former Flyer. So.
Yeah, obviously he's available. There are RFAs on this list too. Obviously, you see Trevor Zegras on here. A lot of these younger guys, Shane Pinto, these guys are not going to be available.
I mean, Kiviranta just got a PTO with Colorado a couple days ago. So,
Wayne Simmons is out there.
Wayne Simmons, I wonder if it's the end of the line for him, just based on like the way the Leafs used him last season. It's unfortunate.
I think he's going to retire.
I would have loved to see him get a cup, man. That sucks.
Yeah, but 34, 35. It's a really good long career
for his type of player too. Like think about all the physicality he's gone through in his career.
I think he could still try another year, but he'd be a PTO.
Yeah, he'd be a PTO.
He'd be a PTO on our team. I can't see him coming to our mix, but it would be cool to see him at camp. But then everybody's gonna want him to make the team, and if he doesn't, it's gonna be awkward. I think most likely he'll just go somewhere new, try to capture on a team that's not very good that can use his services.
And then pretty much after like Zach Aston Reese, we start getting into guys that we just don't really know who they are.
Yeah. So, and then, that makes sense. Let me sort by point per game. If anybody else here?
Yeah, like
most of these guys are going to be RFAs probably.
Before we end,
Parisi's out there.
Yeah, before we end, Yariv, who do we think Kane is going to? Like, if you had to make a guess,
Rangers.
You think he's going to go back to the Rangers?
Yeah.
Really? I don't think so. I think it didn't.
Second half of the year.
I think it didn't mesh well with the Rangers. I honestly feel no, man. I think for somehow, some way, like I think Colorado. I think he's going to go to Colorado.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think he could even go to Tampa, maybe. But I think he'll try to go to a top tier team halfway.
That could pay him also.
Yeah, halfway through the year, keep his energy. And then, get warmed up after the All-Star break and then go into the playoffs with the team.
Yeah. I mean, this is one that doesn't make any sense from a cap perspective because it just I don't know how it could happen, but imagine like on Pittsburgh or the Leafs. That would be fun.
It'd be cool. I mean, dude, it's all possible. We don't know. He might take just a $1 million contract
just to try to win. Yeah.
I want to win. I don't care. You know what I mean?
He just got paid $10 million for the last like 12 years, so or whatever it was. So
exactly. So like maybe we saw it back in the day. Like I remember Teemu Selanne and
would do that. Yeah,
and what's his name? Paul Correa did it with Colorado back in the day. They didn't win a cup, but they stacked up that year.
Even Shanahan to end his career, right? He was hopping around a bit.
So I think Nick Ritchie's an interesting one. He's somebody who should definitely be a PTO.
I wonder Brassard, man, because like Brassard had a really good, pretty decent season with Ottawa last season. It's like third line, fourth line. He got hurt really badly, so I wonder if he's ever going to.
Maybe he's done.
Back.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there anybody else?
Sam Gagner back with Edmonton PTO.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. For me.
I like that.
Just to see him, full circle, kind of end his career with the Oilers. So that's one for me that I'm interested to see if they'll sign him.
So I assume Ryan Murray has injuries, otherwise he wouldn't have fallen this much. I haven't followed him lately, but this is a guy who did have a pretty decent NHL season at one point. It's interesting that he's completely fallen off.
I mean, he was
another guy who should get a PTO.
Number 2 overall pick in the 2012 draft.
Yeah.
Just kind of crazy.
This is again, dude, I talk about it all the time how risky these picks are.
People last season,
especially defensemen.
Last season he played 13 games for the Oilers, 2 games for Bakersfield. So like there must have been some sort of injuries going on, right?
Just like Clefbaum, right? That ridiculous amount of injuries. Never really lived up to his potential because of it. Because he was a good he was their best defender.
Yeah, it looks like he's had back injuries and has been placed on injured reserve on and off, and that's a tough one with the back. So
yeah. I don't think there's too many guys here. Like Derek Stepan could be interesting as a PTO. He's old, but
I think
I know Torts likes him.
I think just to sum up, like for the Flyers, personally, like there's a couple guys like Bear and like some of the younger guys that may be on this list that would be interesting, but like where the Flyers are at, and where kind of they are with the rebuild and how many young guys that they have kind of knocking on the door that are like, okay, could be AHL, could be NHL. I just think they're going to let their young guys maybe fight for those spots if there's any that are available, right?
But a PT, I agree. But I think you should always look for a PTO if you can find a guy.
Sparks competition.
Yeah, because you don't have him signed. It breeds competition. And by any chance you find someone who is a good fit,
it works
that's not a bad thing, especially if it's a guy who fits the plan too. Like, we talked about Puljujärvi. He does not, most likely. But like guys like that, he might fit the plan for somebody else, right?
He's 25 only. Let's say just clicks for him right now. Sometimes it takes a while for some guys.
And maybe they need a third line right winger, and they really just want him to be a 30 to 40 point player, and they think that they can turn him into that. Like, those guys are worth looking for in PTO. And I'll never forget the Flyers pickup of Billy Lino, which wasn't a PTO, it was a waiver wire pickup, but he was part of a Stanley Cup team and a big part of it. And he's a guy, again, went down through the waiver wire. He was in his mid-20s.
Yeah.
You should always look for these guys who are just getting it together, potentially. Ryan Paling is that guy for us this year. He's a guy with good character, good history, came in with a high pedigree. We don't expect him to be a top line player. We just need a good bottom 6 forward. And if he can be a really good 4th line center for us, he'll get re-signed, in my opinion. Because he's young. You can invest in him. You can see where he can fit in on this team in the future.
I agree 100%.
All right. Anything else you want to say?
No, not much. I think it was a fun last segment to kind of go through the potential PTOs and just look at the UFA list as we kind of end, the off season here. So
yeah, we still have I would say 2 more episodes till we have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
We'll have some Frost news, but we're kind of pulling stuff from the ether here. I think you guys all know that. But every podcast is, but we're coming to the end here, and season's right around the corner, and then we're going to ramp up.
Get a lot of fun news. Hopefully some fun interviews as well for you all.
I'm just excited to see who makes the team.
Yeah,
that alone excites me.
It's going to be interesting. There's a lot of young guys I think that could have a chance, and we're unaware of maybe who they are too. So it should be fun. Like, and Tortorella said, right?
Kuntz.
Like, that too. But Tortorella said if a young guy deserves to make it, and he's outplaying an older guy, he'll play him. So I love that honesty, and I'm interested to see kind of where it goes. Yeah,
I would love, like, we know that Torts loved what's his name? Oh my
Forster?
God. Zamula.
Zamula, yeah.
And nobody expected him to get that kind of look last year, especially over York. Like, this shit's interesting. I like it. Anything people should look out for? I know you had something come out for Daily Face Off the other day.
Yeah. I'm doing news articles for them. So essentially, like, I'll probably have an article for them almost every day or close to it. Just like any news that's coming out.
Nice.
Awesome. So keep an eye out for that. And then as we ramp up for the Flyer season, whenever Morgan Frost signs, like, I'm going to have an analysis piece probably on Daily Faceoff and on Flyers Nitty for that. And then whenever we kind of get closer to the season, I'm going to put out some season previews and prediction type articles and stuff on Flyers Nitty as well. So that'll be fun, and we're kind of ramping up and getting close to the season. So I'm excited, man. Get some hockey back here.
I can't wait to have that first dev camp episode.
Yeah,
or especially the talking about the rookie games.
Yeah,
hell yeah. All right. Again, thank you everybody for listening. You guys are amazing. Please like, subscribe, go to iTunes, go to Spotify, leave us a review if you can. All of that stuff is tremendously helpful, like immensely, and commenting too. All that stuff is so awesome. Also, don't forget to hit the notification button to get notified when we release episodes, typically at midnight. We do either Tuesday or Wednesday night we record. So it's kind of our thing. And then as the Flyers go in, it'll probably remain that, because we do a round game. So for those who are new, who didn't catch us during the season, we usually just go right around game. So, but in the first half of the week, that's what we try to do. All right. Again, thank you again, everybody, for listening. Check us out on Twitter, Wolok, and Flyered Up for Vasili. Follow us. We'll be ramping up, and we have a lot more to talk about. And I can smell the ice already.
You can smell all the hockey equipment.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, it's like the worst smell in the world. All right, we love you guys. Remember to keep listening, and remember, always stay gritty.